put this data in this collection, table, this data in this other table, and you keep everything nicely separated so that you reduce the amount of storage required. And you never rewrite the same data twice. That's normalization for you. That's a beautiful concept and a very important concept back then. When our founders started thinking about MongoDB in 2005, 2006, they basically needed something that was more in tune with the new applications that people were building for the web. When you build an application for the web, you go from gathering data or events from your browser. And guess what? That is in JavaScript typically. And it uses JavaScript objects. So it comes down to objects in curly brackets, and they have strings, numbers, dates, null values, uh, Boolean, that kind of data, and something that relational databases don't have, subdocuments and arrays, potentially arrays of documents. So they decided, well, we're going to create a database that stores that kind of data. And when I started using MongoDB, I said, man, this makes so much sense because I no longer had to map all my all my fields in an object to fields in a table. And I understand that now there is, you know, languages that take all that work away from you. But at the time, for me, it was very painful. The other thing was that my databases were starting to grow pretty big, and I wanted to add a column. Boy, back then it was painful to add a column. Alter statement, alter table, save. Oh gosh, this is taking so long. My database is locked. My application is not able to write to a locked database. I gotta wait for uh, for the process to complete before people can enter orders in my e-commerce. Oh my goodness, this was the biggest mistake I ever made. I should have done this in the middle of the night. So these were some of the experiences that made me realize that the technology behind relational databases, even though some of those problems have been taken care of by now, it really wasn't designed um, to match application development. And this is the key. Every time you join tables, you lose performance. Or every time you do multiple queries to get your data, you lose performance. So design your applications and your database using the same concepts in mind, using the same schema in mind. And what is that schema? It's the data sets that um, your application uh, builds and creates. So if you can, just with one query, get all the data that you need for your page, that will be most efficient. And then when you go write that data, just do a single write, and that will be most efficient. So that's what sets MongoDB apart from a traditional relational database. And Raj, for example, asked about why using MongoDB. I also have had experience with Couchbase. And I'm much happier using MongoDB. Uh, but people that love using Couchbase say, oh no, Couchbase is great. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other, but I do know that we have a product that is by far the most advanced on the market because now it is not just a product, it is an entire platform. So if you create that account on Atlas and you log in, you see that you can create your database, but you can also create your backend and your charts, your data analytics with visualization. And so what is that backend? Well, Realm enables you to connect to any service on the internet. So you can make your database literally talk and understand a text message. For example, I send Slack messages to my database and it responds with a Slack message of the query results that I've sent to it. I send a text message to my Twilio account. It goes to Atlas and grabs the data that I sent, that I've requested via text message. It's things like that. I can create my text message using voice commands, right? So I can talk to my database. The um, simplicity of making this happen is incredible. I mean, the the functions that I have to create to make this happen are like 5 lines of code. That's it. So I am personally very much in love with the product. Any questions about why MongoDB and you know what? Oh, here is another point. But yes, please. Any questions? If you ask no questions, you will not be allowed to leave the room at the end of the session.
Is this now?
Sorry? Oh, all right. No, you don't have to have questions. You can have comments. You can have a rebuttal of what I said. Um, so we said that relational database uses normalization to properly split your data in tables. In MongoDB, you can embed tables as arrays of documents inside other tables. Um, do that with a grain of salt. The table that you embed into another table cannot be too big. We'll talk about that when we get to data modeling. But here I have a point that says you can even afford to have duplicate data. So if we go back to that discussion on how storage has gotten cheaper, you realize that you're no longer uh, going to pay for that duplication of data by the thousands. So um, I'm not saying that in MongoDB you duplicate data left and right. In fact, typically you don't, because typically the people creating the database grew up with this mentality of um, not duplicating data. But in reality, you can, or at least you partially can. And that makes things just so much easier. Think, for example, you have a table and you have a table of contacts, people. And all of a sudden we come across addresses and we realize that our contacts can have multiple addresses. They can have a work address and a home address and a beach house and a house in Italy to make CO happy and so on. So gosh, how do I store that in a relational database? Well, I create a separate table and I join it. In MongoDB, you create a field called addresses, and then inside that field, you put an array of addresses. Inside each element of the array will be a document itself with the fields, street, city, state, zip, country, etc. Also, um, you may have data instead in two different collections, like books and authors, for example. So you have a book, a Harry Potter book, and you want to uh, put that the author is J.K. Rowling. So in typical relational database, you would go get the ID for J.K. Rowling's out of the author collection, and you put it into the books uh, table. But now, when you look at that table, that ID doesn't make any sense to you, and so you had to create a join. Every join is somewhat resource expensive. Also, when I look at a document, I like to understand everything about it. So I don't want to see a book called Harry Potter, the Sorcerer's Stone or something, and then author 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like to see, even if I don't embed all the author information, I would make author a subdocument, and then inside the subdocument, I will have the ID. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is there. But then I also have first name and last name. That way I can see that J.K. Rowling's is the contact that I have linked. Now, you're saying, well, there is no referential integrity for that information. And I say, that's right. So what? And after what, 6 years of working with MongoDB, the answer is really, so what? You can enforce that outside of the database in your application just as effectively as you can inside the database. Long story short, I am very happy working with the document model and MongoDB. Um, does anybody have a question about that? You know, uh,
Yeah, actually, I do.
yes,
So you said that there's no referential integrity. So someone could put for one book by J.K. Rowling, they could type the author's name as J.K. Rowling, and then in another they could put the dot after the K as well. So if you were trying to enumerate every book by J.K. Rowling, then how would you go about doing that in a kind of database like that, even if it is consistent as well? Like how would you do that? Is there some kind of a query that you could write to do that?
yes. So first of all, uh, grabbing those fields, J.K. Rowling, is done by copying them over from the author collection. So they come over always the same time, the same way. However, if you make a change to J.K. Rowling, for example, you go there and you say, oh, I forgot to put the dot. So you put it in after you have already copied the name to a lot of other books that don't have the dot, you have to run an update query to update all the other books. Now, you asked a different question. You asked, how do you reference those books by J.K. Rowling? And you go by the ID. We have the ID, right? I created a subdocument that had ID, first name, and last name. So first name and last name is just sugar for me so that I can see it, and sugar for a query so that I can display in my application the book information, including the author, without having to do a join to the other collection. Now, finally, I'll get to answering your question. You want to query for books by J.K. Rowling. So you know that J.K. Rowling's ID is 12345, and so you query by the contents of author.id, and you find values that are equal to 12345. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. So you still have IDs just as in relational databases, but it doesn't actually reference the ID inside the like what would normally be foreign keys in SQL. It actually goes by the name of the author.
So no, it goes by the ID because you would use the ID to create that connection. It's very risky to try to rely on strings to make a join between two collections. What I'm saying is whenever um, you have your data in two collections that is supposed to be a match of each other, you're duplicating data. You're duplicating J.K. Rowling's both in the author collection and in all the books. So to keep those in sync, if you do an update to the author collection, you also have to update the book collection. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I actually think I got it now.
Okay. Um,
Thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. And I mean, you can pay me a lot and I'll come and teach MongoDB at your university.
I'll think about that.
Yes, please think about it. No, you don't have to pay me. The university can pay me. Um, all right. So the next step is how is data stored in MongoDB? Is it just JSON? And a lot of people think, yeah, it's just JSON, but in reality, it's not. It's BSON. BSON is a binary format which preserves JSON, but actually enhances it. Wait, please. Oh, okay. Um, enhances JSON by creating a binary data type for every um, data element so that you can have decimal data types or double data types, integer, long integer, dates, um, and so on. So more data types than are in JSON. So how do you store a document? Let's take a look at a terminal. Okay, so here I'm inside the Mongo shell. The Mongo shell is a JavaScript interpreter that you can use to connect to the database. Let me exit here. So I had connected by just typing the word Mongo. It connected and then it gave me the command line, MongoDB Enterprise, which is what I'm using. CLS clears and just takes you back to the top. So there is a variable called DB, which is your database name. So then you can do show DBs. These are my local, um, these are my databases. Admin, config, and local, those are all MongoDB default databases that are used for maintenance of your database. In this case, Keyhole and Test are two databases that I'm actually running on here. So I'm happy using the test database. Let's see what collections are here. Show collections. Oh, there are a few. Okay. Um, okay. Now let's go into adding a document. We're going to type, the syntax is db.collection name. So we are going to create a collection called MongoDB user group. That's what this is. And then we type insert. Now, if you go back to my document, which is right here. No, not this document. Okay, let's see. I'll go grab. I thought I had it. No. Okay, let me quickly get it from here. I meant to get it. So you see that I begin this discussion with insert. There is two commands, insert one and insert many. Now, if you're a MongoDB veteran, you know that you can insert documents with the insert command. So why am I teaching about insert one and insert many? Well, they've been created after insert and replaced it because we realized that some people had situations where they didn't know if they were inserting one or many documents. Most importantly, updating one or many documents or deleting one or many documents. And so because of the negative consequences of something like that, we switched to this kind of syntax. So that is what you should use. So let's get into insert one. I'm going to go back to the terminal here and use insert one. Does this make sense to everybody? Is it a problem that we don't have mug as a collection already created? For 5 points, I want to hear an answer. Yes or no? I want to hear an answer, or otherwise you don't get out of the classroom. I'm going to call your name. Raj, is it a big deal that I don't have mug as a collection already?
I'm not sure what if Mongo supports creation of referenced collection. It could
Okay,
be. Yeah.
could be. We don't know. All right, then we will see after I try it. And given that I'm the laziest developer in the world, you should have a hint that if I'm going to try it, it's because it works. So here we're going to pass a document. So the structure of a document is it requires curly brackets. This is what we're going to actually store in the database. And then I'm going to give it a field called number 3. Now, if I enter it like this, it's going to have to choose a data type because remember, BSON has data types. So it's going to look like an integer, but unfortunately, it is going to insert it as a double. So if I wrap that number 3 inside the number int function, I am forcing the data type. Great. Now, did it create? Well, it looks like it added an object ID. So let's see. let's do show collections to answer the question that I posed to Raj. Now we have mug, is that very first one. It's case sensitive, the ordering here, so that's why capital letters come first. Um, now we do db.mug.find. I'm stepping ahead a little bit just to see that document. So this still looks like an integer, but it is not. It's a double. And that is where the confusion comes. People think that using MongoDB is just so easy. Um, but really, we're not just a series of shortcuts. We have a pretty solid database with data types and even document validation if that's what you want. However, we also have the flexibility of keeping things simpler. So I could have done this, and this is typically what people do at the beginning, and they look exactly the same. So now I'm going to do db.mug.find, and I'm going to do something a little more advanced. Not right away. First, I'm going to do number 3, and it finds both of them, right? Now I'm going to add a particular data type. Whoa, sorry. So I'm going to do a more advanced $type 1. 1 is double. And now I found only one of them. C6, which is the second document I added. So you see that when I don't specify a data type, it uses double. Now, if I run with 16, which is the integer, I get C5. So essentially, these two are stored with two different data types, even though you can't see it. Any questions about this mystery that I just showed you?
Is there some way of making the types more obvious to whoever is reading the code? For example, like type 1 instead of that, like type double?
Oh, yes. So that's a bit of a, it's an alias. So I think it's lowercase. No. But actually, okay, it's lowercase. So yes, and we have documentation for that, right? So if we go to MongoDB data types, some types, here it is. So for the type double, the alias is lowercase double. For integer, it's int, I believe, 32-bit integer, int. So we could have done int, and we would have gotten C5 instead of C6. So that document that I pulled up has all the possible data types. Really, the ones that you use are the common ones, like decimal, 128, 64-bit integer, 32-bit integer, null, date, boolean, object ID, undefined, binary data, array, object, string, and double. Those are the ones that I commonly use. But you may have a need for the other ones, and they work as well. Any questions? This was so that we would touch on data types. So we talked about insert one, and you see that it has the simplest of syntax for MongoDB. Inside the command parentheses, you have a document with key value pairs. It could have been multiple fields here. Number, name, and I'm gonna do okay. It's still not found because I made it a data type of number decimal. So if I just find all documents here, we see all the data that we have added. You can also insert many documents at a time. To do that, instead of passing a single document, you pass an array of documents. So let's create a variable, array docs. It's an empty array right now. I'm going to add a document to that array, and I'm going to use the field's number. I'm gonna say number int 4 and name. Curious George. Great. This looks syntactically correct. So yes, I've added one document. Let me push another one. I need to add a different name. George Costanza. And now we had two documents, right? Now we can do an insert many. Mug insert many array docs. Okay, will this work? Of course, if I'm showing you, it must work. And it did work. And this is the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement includes the inserted IDs. In an array, these are object IDs. Now, what are object IDs? What if you have never seen an object ID before? An object ID is a data type for creating what's essentially a unique value inside each collection. So let's talk a little bit about underscore ID. Underscore ID is the primary key for your document. It has to be there. You cannot have a document without it. And it has to be unique. It can be of any data type. You can give it a value. We'll see that in a second. If you don't give it a value, it will create an object ID. An object ID is a binary field that is the composition of three different sections. The first is the number of seconds since the Unix epoch in January 1st, 1970. The second is 5 bytes for a random number. And the third is 3 bytes for a progressive number, which starts from a random number that's different for every collection. So as you see, these numbers are very close to each other. They only change at the end. In a very busy application, these numbers are kept unique by MongoDB. So any questions about underscore ID? The bottom line is you can either pass your own unique value or you let MongoDB generate it. What do? I usually let MongoDB generate it because it's easier that way, and I like things to be easy. To making if you don't insert a unique value, you'll get a duplicate key index because there is a unique index automatically created when you create the collection. So let me show you that. Here is the index on the key underscore ID. 1 means ascending, -1 would be descending. And the name of the index is underscore ID underscore. So now if I do db.mog.insert1 and I try to pass the ID, I just pass a value of 1. In fact, I'm going to make it okay. Will this work? Yes. And the underscore ID, inserted ID, is that value. It's the number 1 as an integer. So let's see what data we have managed to insert so far. You see how, because we had not specified underscore ID, we always had an object ID. But this time around, we specified our own. Now, if I do that again, and I change this to you, will it fail? Yes. Why? Because it finds a duplicate key error. So this did not get inserted. If we do a find, we'll see again that we don't have what I was calling U because I passed the same value that already exists. Now, what if I pass a different data type? Would it consider different? No, I don't think so. I've actually never tried this. It's still 1.000 is the same thing as 1. So it's a duplicate. Any questions so far? I've been talking for a long time. Are you getting bored? Let's see. Are you guys still in the chat, actually? I don't think anybody has left yet.
Hello,
All right.
this is Christina. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question. So if I wanted to insert, I'm going to call it a new record with an ID of 2.
Yeah.
Is there a system-defined function to create IDs incrementally? So if I have a custom ID of 1 and then plus whatever new record I create, is there a function that I can create that does that for me rather than, does that make sense?
Yes, makes total sense. The answer is no.
Okay,
And
good
so,
answer.
so at least we have covered that already. But
Okay,
I want to say that all our customers ask that question because they are used to having incremental sequences, right,
yeah.
in Oracle or so how can you do that? Well, you can do a find one and update and get that value. So for example, if I do db.mog.find, oops, one update. Yeah, I can't update the underscore ID, so I'll have to update number. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, number 8. And then I do increase 1, something like this. Oh no, I'm missing something. Oh yeah, all right. So I was missing the closing brackets here. Yeah. Property name got, oh yes. Boy, I'm a little rusty today, must be a Friday. Set number. What am I doing wrong? Oh, yeah. All right, let's give this a shot. Boy. I must have inverted. Let me take a look at the documentation. So $inc colon field and number. Okay, so there's no set. That's what I'm doing wrong. All right, will this work? Yes. Now, it returned the number before. We can also have it return the document after the update, but the default is before. So now we have updated that. Let's see. If we do this, and we need to pass an option to return. Find one and update. Let's see. I don't need an array filter. So I'm looking for options here. Return new document. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Oh, it's null because now we don't have a number 8. We increased it by 1, so now it's number 9. And now it's number 10. So this would give you the number, the next number in the mug collection in the number field. So you could create a sequence. And actually this works, but I have seen customers that requested this and they said, okay, now we got it. But the problem is that they have to do 2 queries, one to create that number and one to do whatever update or insert they were doing. So they ultimately, people say, I'll just use object ID. However, if you want to have a number, that's great. Keep also in mind that underscore ID can be of any data type other than an array. So it can be a subdocument, and underscore ID therefore can be 2 different documents. You can have a number and a name, and that could be your unique underscore ID. So then you can have another document with the same number but a different name, and it would still be unique. It really depends on your use case, how you choose to create your underscore IDs. However, having that possibility has made it so for people to be pretty creative and take advantage of the fact that there is already a unique index on that underscore ID. And so you don't have to create a new index to perform a search for a document. But I think we're getting into a little advanced of a use case. Let me see. Did I answer your question in general
You did.
about the sequence? Okay.
You
good.
did. Thank you.
I probably elaborated a little bit too much.
No, that's great. It was helpful. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. So I haven't heard from Pankti. Wait, you must have joined after we got started. Is that right? Or am I just forgetting that we have talked before? Pankti, I don't know if you're talking. Yeah.
No, I was late. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you owe everybody a cup of coffee, if you don't mind.
For sure.
All right. Thank you. No, nice to meet you, Pankti. Where are you from? I mean, where do you live right now?
I live in Toronto.
Toronto. Wow. An international meetup. I
Yeah,
like it.
actually, I am in States for a few days,
Okay.
so I just checked it and then I logged in because I have some time today.
And what is your interest in MongoDB?
So basically, I'm doing front end development.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get into like how MongoDB is working because the one of our application, the developer was trying to use MongoDB. So I'm just trying to see what is in it so that I
Yes.
can have idea what is going on in the application.
Okay. Yes. So we are touching on the very beginning of MongoDB. We have touched on why MongoDB is great, is the best database in the world.
Okay.
We put that part to bed. Now everybody here is convinced 100%. No, there's a good use case. I basically said MongoDB uh, is a is in tune with the modern application. So you can take a document and store it. And I don't know when you joined, but I was showing how to do an insert one command. And an insert one takes, just like that, a document um, that could be something that comes from your application. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now to avoid having a duplicate, I changed that to a 2. And I just inserted the document. So now you have a a unique value too, and then your data. This can repeat. It can be the same as in other documents, just like in any other database. So the the difference between the way we store data and the way a relational database stores data is that we just stored um, documents. However, we still store data in binary format. So it's not that we just take text and that's what we're storing. Um, our documents are actually binary documents and they can be traversed using code. You know, it's not just a find and then you're trying to find text. That's not what MongoDB is. So I've talked about insert. I've talked about find one and update. There is, I've shown you how to do a find. There is another command called find one. So db.mug.find one. That just actually gets a document and returns it. Even in your application, if you do find one, it will return the document. This is the Mongo shell, is not an application. So um, to explain that find actually returns a cursor, I'm going to show you this. X, I'm going to create a variable X, db.mug.find. So now I have a cursor in the variable X. X, if I type it, now the Mongo shell will grab the documents and return them, but your application will not. You need to step into it. So you need to run x.hasNext to find out if there are documents, and it tells us true. And so then I do x.next. and it gets the first document. I can do x.next again, and we'll get the next document. Notice the difference here, C5 and C6. Otherwise, the documents look exactly the same. I'm going to do x.next one more time, and it returns this other document that we created. X.next, Curious George, George Costanza, this one, that one, and then it returns an error because it's false. So now X is, as a cursor, is exhausted and it has nothing. So it's still declared as a variable, but the cursor is gone. So to repopulate this, I would have to run x equals db.mug.find. Oh, it actually ran it. So now x has nothing again. Okay, so I need to declare a new variable. Let y equals db.mug.find. Okay, now if I type y, it's going to get the data, exhaust the cursor, and now the cursor is empty. So did I demonstrate the difference between find one, which returns the document, and find, which returns a cursor, not the actual documents? I hope that you see that, because when you go into an application and you try to pass the results to a variable, this variable y doesn't contain documents. It contains a cursor, so it will be object. So to actually get a document inside the variable, you need to do this. So I don't want to repeat this part. Ouch. Okay, fine. And then I do let ZA equals Z dot next. And then A is my document. Okay, I can do A dot number to return 3. Okay. I'm showing you this because you will need to have a way to actually work with the values in your application, right? You're not interested in the whole document. You're interested in that number 3,
Yes.
right? So here you go. I just showed you how to do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can do db.mug, or sorry, let b equal db.mug.find1 and pass number 8. Now B will actually contain the document. You don't need to do next. And that is the difference between find one and find. So if I type B, you get that document. But if I had done, let's see, find one, just find, this is a cursor. So if I do C, okay, you do get the document. Why? Because the Mongo shell doesn't return a cursor. When it sees a cursor, it automatically fetches the data in the cursor. But your application will not do that. Your application will make you use next, even if you have just one record. So that's the difference between find and find one. We have 10 more minutes. So I am going to continue here with delete or update one. When we did the insert many, we could have passed options. Let me see. History doesn't work here, so our docs. Okay, I still have this. So db.mug.insert many our docs. That's the first parameter. Then a second parameter to insert many would be your options. So options could be ordered false. Darn it, I didn't close the parentheses. So what is ordered false? Ordered false doesn't stop at an error. So if you encounter an error, and the error will be, for example, a duplicate key, a duplicate ID, then execution stops. It hits the error and all the other documents don't insert. Instead, with ordered false, they happen kind of in parallel. More correctly, they happen independently of one another. So if you run into an error, the other ones will still get added. What I wanted to show here is the use of two parameters. We have the array of documents, that's your first parameter, and then the specification that we want to run this query not in ordered fashion, so ordered false. Now we're going to get into update, and it supports 2 or 3 parameters. So we're going to do update 1. First, the first parameter is the filter. What document do you want to update? It's like your where clause in SQL. So I want to update where number is equal to 8. Okay. It's equal to 8. And then the second parameter is what update do you want to pass? Sorry, need to be comma separated. And so $set is the operator that says update each individual field. And so here I'm going to give a field name and a value. I'm going to change the name. Okay, in MongoDB, you don't have to quote the field names if they are root level fields. If they're embedded fields, then you need to pass quotes and dot notation. You need to put dots to separate each level of the fields. We'll look at that next time. So I'm going to set name equals Carl. Boom. This should work. Yeah. Wow. Match count 1, modified count 1. Okay. So now I'm going to do another update. In fact, I'm going to just run it again, just like that. It says modified count 0 this time because the value was already Carl, so it didn't actually modify it. Now I'm going to change it to Joseph. I'm going to find the number 18, and guess what? I'm going to pass an option, so a third parameter. And this option is a beautiful option. It's called upsert, and true is going to be the value. What does upsert do? If it doesn't find the document with number 18, it will create a document with number 18 and name Joseph. So match count 0, modified count 0, but here's my upserted ID. That's the ID of the document that got inserted from the upsert command. This is something that other databases don't have, typically at least. I haven't heard. So you need to become familiar with it because it's a nice feature. So here is my number 18, my name Joseph. Number 18 and name Joseph. Any questions on this upsert? All right, so there is still 5 minutes, and I think we need to bring it to closure. CL, what do you say? Please join Daniele for part 2. Yes, so part 2, I'm going to continue with this training, essentially. And, or does it have to be a MongoDB for SQL Pros? CL, go ahead and take over. I'm going to stop sharing.
Hey, thank you very much, Danielle. Yeah, I think that was a wonderful presentation, and we got to learn the basics, you know, the CRUD operations.
Yeah.
I want to give the audience a chance to see if they have any questions or if they just want to talk about their shop and what kind of challenges that they have. It doesn't even have to be CRUD. It could just be
Right.
anything cloud in general. We're all ears. Let us know. Let us know about your world.
For 5 points. Yeah, no, I always get silence when I do my trainings. It's most of the time is because people are just starting to be exposed to this environment. So they're kind of hit by a lot of new information. But please, you know, ask away. Or as CL said, relate what we talked about to your work, to your situation.
This is Christina. I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that I do remember at the beginning and throughout the presentation, you extol the virtues of MongoDB, and I appreciate that. However, is this a platform that has some cons in that? Are there any business scenarios or use cases under which MongoDB wouldn't work? Wouldn't be as efficient?
Yes, so that is a very good question. And I have worked even with banks and people that say, we have to follow a specific schema. So show us how to use MongoDB to enforce a schema. The reality is you can accomplish whatever you're after, both with a relational database and with MongoDB. There's not anything that you cannot do, absolutely cannot do. I haven't run across any use case that I couldn't satisfy with MongoDB. So I have chosen MongoDB as my database for any use case. However, the um, whether one database is better than another will depend on your ability uh, to work with it. From the DBA point of view, maybe you don't want to have a flexible database where a developer can go in and add a new field. Maybe that's a big no-no. And so you would much rather create a relational table instead of taking the time to create the validation, document validation for MongoDB, which is maybe not what you're familiar with. So as a DBA, you're better off creating your tables and saying, this is the database we're going to use. What I am seeing is people want flexibility, but flexibility may not be better in all use cases.
Hey, Danielle, I have a follow-up
Thank
to
you.
that,
Yeah.
to Christina's question. Is there still going to be a place for traditional relational databases, or is the NoSQL concept a no-brainer? That's the future, and that's where everything is going.
I don't think we're going to see relational databases go away in my lifetime. Maybe someday. Maybe someday there will be a new technology altogether. There is definite advantages to MongoDB that I think are going to cause the adoption of NoSQL databases in general to grow faster than relational databases will grow. But I expect Oracle to keep on growing, for example. So especially through their cloud product. So the other thing that's happening is that people are moving their databases from on-prem to the cloud, both for relational and NoSQL. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I had a follow-up to Christina's use case also. I understand that foreign keys and primary keys, that relationship is not supported. Is that a NoSQL concept? And how do you kind of accommodate that type of relationship in the NoSQL world?
Okay, so in a relational database, you can enforce that a foreign key be present, or else it's not a valid document or something like that. If you want to do the same in MongoDB, you need to create a validator associated with the collection and pass a document with $JSON schema, which defines all the requirements for your collection. It can be these fields have to be present, or they have to be present, and this is the kind of values, the data type that they will accept. Um, there's just like a range of values. It can either be Daniel or George. It's the flexibility of the schema validator is just as good as creating a schema in a relational database.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Christina.
So, yeah, Christina is good. She asks questions.
Auntie Michael? Praveen?
No, I'm just basically listening to other people's questions. I ordered a book on MongoDB and it should be here tomorrow, so I'm gonna do some reading about it.
That's great. I appreciate you doing that. I think it will pay off.
Yeah, and Michael, you have Danielle's LinkedIn in our chat above. Danielle, you've been really kind to us. I mean, I know that you were, even before me, I'm standing on your broad shoulders in terms of being a community advocate. You're big on helping the community. It's all out of your kind heart. It's all volunteer. And we all really appreciate your help. And we wish you much success. If we could do anything for you, let us know.
Thank you. Um, I'm not saying that you can't, so I'll think of something. Um, I just hope that I have provided something useful to the people who attended, and that you have some inclination to come back next time. Because maybe my goal in life is to be doing this with hundreds of people, just listening to every word that comes out of my mouth. Maybe that's my goal in life. I don't know. But truly, I want to help you guys out. So I hope I put my heart into this. I hope you felt it, and maybe you will find the time to come back next time.
We will.
Bye.
We will.
Thank
Will
you.
there be a part two for sure?
Oh, wow. That was great. That was a round of applause. Are you kidding me?
November 20th, guys.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you guys stay safe. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks,
I'm going to
Praveen.
drop.
Thanks,
You're
Christina.
welcome.
Kanti.
Bye.
Michael, thank you. Hey, Praveen.